Okay, so welcome to the last week of school, right? Next week is finals. Next Monday, everything's over, at least in this class. We meet at 8 next Monday. You're done at 10. So we don't go the full time because it's final schedule. So our class is a little bit unique, and a lot of the architecture classes are like this, in that we have technically 2 available times for a final because our class spans 2 normal slots. So we have class from 8 to 11. That means that if you were at a different class, you might have 2 different classes in that time block, that 3 hours. Because we're one 3-hour class, we can have our final on either day or on both days. And so I always pick the earlier day so that it's done and out of you. You don't have to think about it anymore. So that's why it's Monday. We will not have anything on Wednesday. So you're free on Wednesday. Class is officially over at 10 on Monday the 22nd. So you can't post anything. Well, technically you can post anything more, but I won't count it towards your grade. So at 10 on Monday, class is officially over. Time to move on. Do something else. Okay? I do have updated grade sheets for everybody today as of this morning. So they're very, very current. You can see where you are. You can get caught up and those kinds of things. This will be your last grade sheet before your final grade. So you're not getting anything more back from me after today. But it's a good check-in as to where you are. I would say, generally speaking, I'm fairly happy with the grades in this class. My other class, not so much, but we'll talk about that with them. You guys are doing pretty well, so I'm not overly worried. Today, we're going to talk through your last architectural perspective view. We've done the elevation view. We did the plan view. Last class, we did the section view. Now we're going to do the perspective view. Remember, 3 of those 4 views are due as your assignment 106 on Wednesday. So if you've been keeping up, chances are you have at least 3 views already. You can see if today's view is better or worse and pick your best 3 of the 4 to turn in. So when we approach architectural perspectives, it's a little bit different in that we're going to kind of reverse engineer what our model is going to look like based on what our photograph looks like. And if this was a real project, you would have gone to the real site and you would have taken real photos at the real site, and you would already have these views established. For our purposes today, we're going to pick a view off of the internet, and then we'll work with that view. I've pulled up a Creative Commons search here for Yosemite Meadow, and as I scroll through here, I would be looking for what's the right view. Now, a view like this wouldn't necessarily be a bad view to pick, something like this. The only challenge is, in the scheme of this photograph, our building would be rather small. So it's really about finding and picking the right view in conjunction with our model. I've used this one in the past before. It's not a bad view. It gives us a pretty good place to position. So that might be one that's worth working on. I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I've already pre-scouted my images. I'm going to use this image, if we can see it here, right here, because it's about the right size, but it adds certainly a layer of complexity to it because of the tree being in the way. We also have some reflections in the pool, so it feels like it would be a challenging one for me to try to do in front of you, and I think that's a good thing. So I'm going to work with this particular photograph, and once I have the photograph picked, so in this case, this particular photograph, I have to think about how is my building going to match up with my photo. So number 1, what's the right perspective? And number 2, what's the right lighting conditions? And I'm going to work through both of those with my SketchUp. And I'm going to kind of work these side by side so that I can see my view here and also my SketchUp model I'll put over here so I can kind of see them both at the same time and decide. Now, number 1, I know that this photograph was shot at somebody's eye level because it's an eye, they weren't flying or anything like that. It's a normal photograph. So it would make sense for my SketchUp view to be in an eye level perspective as well. So one of the tools that SketchUp has for that is this little person that says position camera. And if we click on the person here, we can put our person in a particular spot, and our camera will zoom down to looking at this as if it were kind of an eye-level perspective. We get the little look-around tool, and that can help us position our particular view. So I'm going to make this big again. And really, my building, based on my photo here, needs to be off to one side a little bit. Let me pan over a little bit more, maybe about like that. And so I'm referencing the photo. I'm thinking about where the building's going to go in context with the photo here. Seems pretty good. I think I need to drop it a little bit down. Yeah, we'll give that one a shot. So the other part of this is sometimes it takes a couple tries and a couple adjustments before you feel like you've got it. So I'm not going to save the scene just yet. I'm going to do the first export, and I'm going to check it. So I'm going to go to Export 2D Graphic, just like we've been doing. I know I have some extra stuff on here that I'll end up cleaning up. Let's put it into today's folder. All the way down here at the bottom now. And let's call this lines. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open that view in Photoshop. So let's open up Photoshop. And let's go to File, and then Open. And this time, instead of opening the lines drawing first, I'm going to open the actual photograph first. There it is. So I start with the photograph. Let me press Control-0 to zoom in a little bit. And then I'll go to File and then Place, and I'm going to drop in that view that I just created and see how it lines up. So I'll switch the blending mode into multiply so I can kind of see through it here. Let me go back to normal and just adjust the opacity down. And I need to kind of see, is it going to feel like it fits about right? I might need to scale this down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that seems like it could that could work out at my angle. But if it didn't, I'd have to go back to SketchUp and make some adjustments. Once it looks about right, then we'll go ahead and say, yeah, okay, this will work. So let me commit to this for right now, and I'll go back to my SketchUp file. And now that I like this particular view, I'm going to go ahead and save the scene. So let me open up Scenes here. We're going to call this River Perspective. Now it's saved as my river perspective. Let's go ahead and turn off. I'll go to View. I'm going to turn off the section cuts, turn off the axes, and turn off the guides. I have just the line drawing now. I can go to File, Export 2D Graphic, and I'm going to re-export this one. Then I'm going to turn on X-ray mode. So let me go into my styles here. Under Edit, under Face Settings, I'll click on X-ray so I can see more of what's happening in my building. And I'll go to File, Export 2D Graphic, and we'll call this one X-ray. Export. Perfect. Let's turn off X-ray. Now we come to the shadows. So once again, I'll go to View and then Shadows. But I have to pay attention to what my shadows look like in the scene here. So let me turn this off for a second, and let's take a look. As we look at it, looks like this tree is casting a shadow kind of down in this direction. Looks fairly close to noon. There's not two real deep shadows. There's a little bit of a shadow here. So when I go back to my SketchUp model and I look at my shadows here, I'm going to adjust my time of day. Let's see here. There's shadows. to around noonish. Looks like they're coming slightly toward us. And then I'll adjust my time of year so that they feel like they're fairly short, the shadows, maybe about like that. So I'm adjusting for what my photograph is saying. So if you created this, for a particular site and you went to the site and you photographed it, you would know exactly the date and time that you photographed it. So it makes it really easy to set up the shadows. We're approximating a little bit. So let me go back to my styles here. I'm going to go back to my edge and turn off my edges so I have just the shadows. And I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll call this one Shadows. Then we'll go back to my Select, and this time I'm going to go to Sketchy Edges, and I'm going to pick my two. The first one will be Airbrush with endpoints, but I'm going to turn off Shadows, Guides, Section Cuts, and Section Planes. And then I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'll call this one Airbrush. And then Export. And then I'll also do Pen Gray. There it is. But I'll go back and turn off my guides, section cuts, and section planes. And I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll call this one Pen. Export. Perfect. Now when I go back to Photoshop, I have a slight problem in that my overall, if I go to place my next image in, if I go to File and then Place, and let's say I drop my, let's put the shadows in so you can see this a little bit better. The shadows come in as a larger object. And so that's a little bit of a problem as they come in. I need to make sure that they're all scaled correctly. Remember, I had to scale this so that it was the right size. The other option would be for me to scale the background. So one way or the other, I have to scale them. So I think for the ease of putting this together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my, and actually delete that first one that I brought in. And then I'll bring in the rest of them. Let me go to File and Place, and I'll bring all the rest of them in. Just straight in. File, Place. So that they line up on top of one another. Okay, so those are all there. Let's take all of these and change them to be in multiply mode. If I can. Where's multiply? There it is. All right, we're seeing our drawing there. And now I'm going to adjust the background instead because it's easier to adjust that as one rather than adjusting 5 of the other drawings. So let me go right-click, Layer from Background. And then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform. And we're going to go to a free transform. You zoom out a little bit, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'm holding down Shift to make sure that it lines up correctly. Let's go back a little bit more. Yeah, that seems reasonable now that it's fit, and then I'll commit to it. And so the advantage of doing it that way is it's, again, one adjustment rather than 5 adjustments. And it's just a matter of time and ease of doing it. So now it's time to cut out that background so that we can see the building in a little bit better light. So let me turn off everything except for the lines. Actually, before I do that, let me rename all these layers so that they're clean. So we'll call this background. We'll call this one airbrush. Lines, pen, shadows, and X-ray. Perfect. Let's take the shadows and pull it down there. Let's take the lines, pull it down there. All right, and let's turn on the lines. So I'm going to start by using the magic wand to select everything around my object. but I have to also add in the upper two pieces there and there so that I have an entire selection. At this point, I have nothing that goes all the way through. I have no see-through pieces that I'm seeing, so I'm not selecting anything inside the building at all. Let's go to my background layer. We'll turn that one on, and I'll go ahead and click on the Add Layer Mask. Oops. Sorry, I have to select the background and then Add Layer Mask. There we go. So that's now clipping out. Now, I have some problems. Remember, I had this tree that went through, and I had some little bushes that went through. So part of the reason that I did this as a mask is to make this a little bit easier to adjust as we go forward. So let me turn off the lines for just a second. Let me disable the layer mask. And I need to take a look at the trees and the bushes that are in my way. So I need to select the tree. I can start with the magic wand tool, and I can select the bulk of the tree here, like that. But I'm going to also go to Refine Edge. So let me go to, remember we did this way back. I'm going to go to Select. I'm going to go to Refine Edge. And this is where we get the various on black or on white to see how it's being selected. It's not doing too bad. Let me go to radius 1, 3, and 0.3. And I'm just going to paint in here a little bit and see if we can't get some better selections out of this. OK, so once I'm done, I'll say OK. And I have this selection made, Control minus. I'm going to re-enable the layer mask. And I'm going to work on the layer mask itself right here. And I'm going to paint using my paintbrush with white. Make this a little bit smaller in here where the tree was. So we'll paint this back in so we get little bits of the tree. It may help at this point to see the lines. So you can see that I'm painting over the tree and bringing the tree in front of my building a bit. Now, over in here, I'm not worried about those trees. I'm going to get rid of those eventually. But I do want this part to come in front a little bit. Yeah, about like that. We'll deal with the grass section in just a second. All right. So once I have that tree brought through the way it is there, I need to go ahead and get rid of these trees because they're not going to matter. So let me flip back to white, and I'm going to paint these out. I'm going to sharpen up my brush a little bit to be able to cut a cleaner edge right there. Perfect. Oops, looks like I need to go back to my lines layer, new selection, like that. Come back to my mask. Oops, flip my colors, sharpen those up a little bit. There we go. So essentially what I've done is I brought that tree forward so that it's in front of my drawing. So I'm starting to try to nest this in. Now, when I get to doing the grass brush along this edge, which is how I'm going to blend in this lower section here, there's a little tiny tree that's right on that edge. Let me take a quick look at that tree first. See that tree right there? That needs to be in front. Right there. Let me do a magic wand on that tree. About like that. And let me go Refine Edge. So under Select, Refine Edge. Same settings here. 1, 3, and 0.3. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. That's not going to let me. And we'll just paint around that just a little bit. Perfect. I'll say OK. And then I'll go back to enabling my layer mask. And we're going to paint using, white, that section, so a little bit of that shows through in front. Doesn't look all that attractive right now, but if we come back a little bit, we'll get the telltales of a little bit of tree in front. So now I need to go ahead and I need to integrate this into the rest of my view here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to apply this mask to the layer permanently. So I'm going to right-click on the mask and say Apply Layer Mask. It gets rid of that and makes this part of it transparent. So if we were looking at it now, we'd see just this as part of my view. This will allow me to use the grass brush along the edge. Oop, looks like there's a little bit of stuff that needs to go away. Let me use the eraser really quick and just clean that up. Let me soften up the eraser. There, we'll go like that. Control minus. OK, so now I'm going to come in with the clone stamp. Here's the clone stamp tool. And once again, I'll use the grass brush on the clone stamp. It's right there, 134. And I will copy from Alt, from right there. And I need to copy some grass in front. Now, that's too big. So let me Control Z. And let's make this a little bit smaller. Copy from here. And we're going to work our grass along there. Now, I'm having a problem because it's cutting me at the edge right there. So I need to zoom out a little bit, move down, zoom in. And I'm going to copy from a little bit lower. Let me hold down Alt and copy from down here. There we go. And let me do some grass along that front there. Now, as I start to go back down the side here, I need to start to shrink my brush because this is in perspective view. So I'll continue making it a little bit smaller as I go backwards until I get to the end there. And then I can make it a little bit bigger. And we can work over a little bit more. Now, that part needs to kind of get covered up. And this is the advantage of Photoshop, is we can keep working with our clone stamp to kind of get rid of certain pieces. I have some layers in here that are going to be a little bit challenging to get rid of and may take some finer levels of detail. OK. So once I have it like this, I need a little bit more grass right in there to fill in. We can turn back on my lines, for example, but this background needs to go above the rest of the layers so that it blocks off those lines. So you see now that it starts to feel grounded. That's what we use the grass brush for, is to make it feel. I need to do the same thing over on this side. So let me come over here. And I'm going to do the clone stamp again. So Alt to copy from. And we're going to work our way along that front edge. Needs to be a little bit bigger. Like that. All right, something like that. Last little piece would be this wing coming out. Try to cover that up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of that, covering that up. OK, so now if I press Control 0, it's starting to feel like it's part of the scene. I'm blending it into the scene, which is obviously the goal of this particular part of the exercise. So now that that's in place, now we need to go through and start to think about this as a building. What do we do to highlight the building, et cetera? We can start with the windows. The sky color up here isn't particularly cloudy. So when I do a search for my sky background to use for the windows, it's probably more like clear sky, or maybe high clouds. Let's try high clouds. Come on, Flickr. Do something like this. I'm just looking for something subtle. That looks almost blue to you guys. There's a little bit of clouds on it. Let me go ahead and download this in its original size. And as soon as it's done, there it is. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to put it on my flash drive for today. Perfect. And now we'll go back to Photoshop. I'm going to work on that for the windows themselves. So I'll go to File and then Place. I'll drop in that image. Let's pull this a little bit smaller. Something like that. Perfect. And I need to create the mask for these clouds. So let's call this Windows now. And the Windows layer is going to go below everything else. And so that I can mask it off, we'll come in here and we'll be on the Lines layer. And I'm going to select each window. So let me hold down Shift. Turn off the background for just a second. So in this area, I'm seeing through to a bunch of individual little lines. So we have to work our way through these. Sometimes it's easier to just switch to, the polygonal lasso tool so that I can just draw right on these windows their selection. Like that. Saves time rather than using Magic Wand. And we'll select this one as well. One more. There we go. So now I have those selected. Control-0 zooms out. But I'm going to use that as a mask on my Windows layer. So I'm going to click on Add Layer Mask, and it's going to clip the windows so that they're showing just where the windows are. And if I were to turn on the background, right, we can start to see that there's some windows in there as part of this. Now, as is the case with any of these, you have to decide how much this is a drawing versus how much this is a collage of pieces or whatever. So in some cases, it might be relevant to put on siding. In some cases, you might want to leave it more like a drawing like this. You have to feel what is right for your showcase piece. So if I were to add some concrete texture to the sides of these walls or something like that, I would go to File and then Place and bring in the concrete texture. And let's see, I think I have one from here. Yep. So there's my concrete texture. I did not want it to show up on that mask, so let's go ahead and commit to it. And I'm going to turn off the background here. I need to make this smaller, so I'll go to Edit, Free Transform, we'll make this smaller. Probably something like this. And to do this side, it's probably going to take more than just one piece. So let me copy it. Control-C, Control-V gives me a second copy. And I'll drop that one there. But as I look at this, if I were to use this on this wall, it wouldn't feel like it's in perspective. So I really need these two to be in perspective. So let me take, it's this one and this one. I'm going to merge these together, right-click, and I'll say Merge Layers. So they're one. We'll just call this Concrete 1. And then I'll go to my Transform Skew so that I can drop this down and I can drop this up. Let's pull these over a little bit like this. Perfect. Now that needs to go up. Sometimes the easiest way is to just line it up with your actual building. There and right there. And so now that texture feels like it's in line with the building itself. So I still need to mask off the extra edges. So let me click on my lines layer, and I will select these two pieces. That line should have gone away, but it's OK. With those two selected, I'm going to go to the Concrete 1 layer and say Add Layer Mask. Now it clips it for just that particular piece of the building. So I can continue on here and work with other pieces of perspective. So let me go to File and then Place. There's a reason I named it Concrete 1, because there's lots of versions of this. Let me go ahead and zoom out. And we'll make this a little bit smaller here. And let me zoom in. And this probably needs to be a little bit smaller. About like that. OK, let me go ahead and there we go. I'm going to go ahead and commit to that. And then once again, I'm going to copy it, but I'm going to do several of them this time. Control-C, oops, Control-C, Control-V. We'll line that up to there. Control-V. To there. There. And there like that. So I have that whole set there. I'm going to use these for my side or my front face that's going along that. So this can take a little bit of time to set these up because you have to do it for each face or each plane of the building. So now that I have those in place, let me add a couple more up on top here. I need a few more. And I might need a few more going up this side. All right, I'm trying to give myself enough to work with. So it's right here. It's layer 1 through 11 plus this one. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Merge Layers. And this is going to be called Concrete 02. There we go. And once again, I'll go to Edit, Transform, and then Skew. And we're going to start to adjust this for the building itself. So we'll go there, pull this up. So here's part of a challenge in that these are on slightly different faces. So this line are out. This and this are in a little bit. So I'm going to have to approximate. It's going to be more about like that. And then when we get to the top here, let's drop this a bit there. Then this one's going to be a bit more. It's probably about like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And I'm going to work through the masking for this. So we've got a mask that's going to be set up on this end. We've got one that's going to be here, there, 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 and there as a separate set. And that piece should be included. that piece should be included as well. So there's a few pieces that aren't included. Once I have these set up, we'll go onto the concrete layer and we'll say add layer mask, and now it's starting to work for those pieces as well. So I need another set that's going to do this wall, but you get how these are starting to work together as part of it. You guys don't need to see me do this for the whole drawing, but the point is that once you start to add those textures in, they start to feel like this is a little bit more integrated into the site. If I turn on the shadows layer, all right, the bulk of my building was in shadow, but remember I need some shadows that are kind of spilling out over the ground here. So let's take shadows and let's put them on top of the background so that we're getting some of the shadows coming out. And then I need to work through the grass brush along this edge to soften that up. So let me look just at the shadows for a second. We're going to turn everything else off. Here we are. And I need, on this layer, to copy this white over the edge of this. So I'm going to use my clone stamp, and I'm going to choose with Alt here. Oh, I have to rasterize the layer first. So let me rasterize the layer. OK, then I'm going to choose with Alt right there, and I'm going to start to break down this shadow along the edge here. And if I were to turn back on the background, you can see that that shadow is breaking down. That line of the shadow is breaking down. So I'll work my way along that front edge. And then I'll work my way up this side. Remember, I need to make my brush smaller as I get further back, because the grass gets smaller as it gets to the back. We'll move our way around. I'll do this one, make it a little bit bigger. All right. Now, this is a little bit challenging because really some of that gray should be standing up there. So if that was the case, sometimes it's easier to fill a section of gray to copy from over here. So let me borrow this color and let me fill it right there. I'll go back to my clone stamp so that I can copy from right there. And now I can copy some of that. I'm going to have to cover that up with the white again. There we go. So I have that gray. Let me come back to the white along the front so I can get rid of that. Like that. So I'm softening that shadow. If I were to turn back on the background, you could see that I'm getting some of the shadow occurring on the ground itself. It looks like I have a little issue with my ground right in here not applying correctly. So let me see if I can fix that a little bit. All right, let's turn that back on. There's my shadows. There you go. So we see the shadows are reading a little bit differently there, which is what we want. I'm not overly worried about it behind the tree. Long term, those are going to get covered up anyway. So let's go ahead and turn back on my lines. Control minus, there we go. And it looks like we can still see that shadow, so I'm going to need to deal with that. So hold on one second. Let me see what I want to do here. I'm just going to add a layer mask to the shadows, and I'm going to paint using black right in there so that that part goes away and we don't see that so much. Oh, you guys can't see it on the projector anyway. OK, so now that I have that put together, I have my building put together, we can turn on some of my X-ray view here. We can turn on my pen and or my airbrush depending on what the look is that we're going for. Maybe it's like that. Let me turn back on my concrete texture, something like that. OK, so I'm feeling pretty good about how this works. And if I look at the scene, Okay, it's reasonable, it's integrating reasonably well. There's one other glaring problem, and that is that, and I picked this on purpose, that is that we have a reflection. We have the trees in there, and we have my building. I need to make the reflection of my building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn everything, let me turn the background off, leaving just this kind of showing there. And I need to be able to use this as a reflection later on. Oh, and I should get rid of that square. That was a mistake. Let me get on the shadows layer. And let me paint with white. There we go. Sorry, mistake. OK, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this particular piece minus the background. I'm not going to worry about the background. And I'm going to go to File, Save As. And I'm just going to save this as a JPEG. So we'll go to JPEG. Actually, before I do that, let me save the regular work here. Let me go to File and Save. And we're going to call this one perfect. We do a File, Save As. This is going to be a JPEG. There we go. And we're going to call this one Complete Building. And I'll go ahead and click Save. I'll say OK. There we go. So we have the complete building. Now I can bring the complete building in on top of this. So let me go to File and then Place. And I'm going to go find that complete building. There it is. And we'll drop it right in on top of my piece. So let's switch this to be multiply for the moment. And let me turn off the background just so you can kind of see it for just a second. And I'm going to go to Edit and then Transform. And I'm going to flip. I always forget whether, I think it's flip vertical. There we go. Flip vertical. I'm going to move this so that it comes down. So we're getting the reflection right there of my building. Now if I were to turn back on the ground here, we can start to see this as a reflection. But we've got some perspective happening. And if we look at the trees, we can see a little bit of that already happening. So we may need to skew this a little bit. Let me go to Edit. Let me go to Transform. And let me go to Skew. I'll zoom out a little bit. And we're going to tweak this just a little bit out. And just a little bit out, like that. A little bit more. There, something like that. And we're judging where the trees are, where the branches are, where they feel like it should fit. This piece of the tree is that piece of the tree. So we know that our building's slightly taller than that, so it should go right about there or so. Do you see how I'm kind of playing backwards and forwards with that? So now that I have that, I'll go ahead and commit to it. There it is. It's a little bit strong. If we look at the trees themselves, they're toned down a little bit in their reflection. So let's go ahead and adjust my opacity down on that till it starts to feel a little bit less, maybe about like that or so. And then it also has a little bit of a greenish cast to it. So let's add on top of this layer, let's go in and add a adjustment layer. So Layer, New Adjustment Layer. If I can find it, there we go. And let's do a hue and saturation adjustment on it. And I'm going to press Control-Alt-G to tie that to that. And we're going to shift the colors. Let me turn off everything else so we can see just that for a second. We're going to see if we can't shift the colors enough. Now it's not changing enough for us to really see anyway. OK, so I've got that. Let me turn back on everything else like that. I am going to make this layer rasterized. So let me go in and rasterize the layer here. And let me zoom in on it just a little bit more. So we're seeing our reflection. But see, if I look in the pool here, there's little ripples. We need to kind of mimic that a little bit so this feels like it goes in. And we'll use that right here on our smudge tool or our blur tool. And we'll go a little bit smaller. And we're going to run some streaks through this. So if I let me put this at full opacity so that you guys can hopefully see it a little bit better. And let me try smudge instead of blur. Yeah, there we go. See how that twists those a little bit? In that particular case, it was a little bit strong. So let me make this a little bit smaller here, like that. And we're going to run some lines through our reflection. And then I'm going to go back to the blur tool right here so that it's not so sharp. And we're going to blur that up a little bit. It's always a little iffy as to whether you can even really see it too much on there. OK, so once we blurred it up just a little bit like that, we can go ahead and drop that opacity down to where we had it before so that it's reading much softer. And now it's starting to feel like it belongs as this. Now, I still have some issues. Obviously, on top of the rock, I can't have anything. On the shoreline here, I can't have any reflection. So we need to make some adjustments. So really quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer mask on the shadow right here. And then I can paint with black on that layer mask. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Let me zoom in here a little bit. We will get rid of those lines on my rock there. But we're also going to get rid of these lines oh, come on. There we go. Because they shouldn't be on the ground here. So we'll touch those up. Here. And we'll adjust that out just a little bit like that. And the rest of that looks pretty good. Adjust that. Like so. I'll press Ctrl-0 to zoom back out. And so now we have our building inserted into the scene, but we also have the reflection of it down below. I could spend a little bit more time with the smudge tool to roughen this up to match a little bit better with the water, but you guys are getting the sense of kind of what was going on and how it works. So I've managed to put my building into the scene. I've managed to give myself a reflection. The last piece of this is to add a little bit of entourage to the building itself. And that comes by adding people. And people and scale always really help. So I'm going to go to File. I'd love to put a person like right here looking at the building from across the river or something like that. So I need to find the right person, which is obviously part of the challenge. I have some that are already on my flash drive. I'm just going to go to File and then Place. And let's take a look at what people I might have. And I don't really like somebody walking their dog. Let's look here. That could work. I thought I had people, but apparently I don't. So let me look real quick at the course website. I'll go to Resources, Collage Images. Let's look for people. Oh, how nice. Of course it's not working. Load. So remember, it's always about finding the right view of the person. So I'm scrolling through. Come on, finish loading. Trying to find the right person. Those are a little bit blurry. Light conditions matter. Failing miserably. Anyway, obviously this is the part that takes time. Let me see if I can find another one. Hold on a second. I know exactly the kind of person that I'm looking for, and it's bugging me that I can't find it. Okay, let's use these people holding hands. That'll work. Okay, so let me bring those in like that. And again, the good news is always that they're pre-cut out. That's why I was picking from them. I want them to be lower in this layer stack because I don't want the green tint applying to them. Let's go ahead and commit to them for a second. Let's drop them a little bit lower. Actually, let's drop them a little bit higher. This Control-Alt-G should still be applied to only the shadows. There we go. And I need to pay a little bit of attention to their shadow condition. It's not quite right, so again, I should spend some more time working on this. I also want to make some adjustments. Let me go to Free Transform on them. And I'm going to flip them over so that they're looking more at my building like that. I'm going to drop them down, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to pull their feet off so I don't have to integrate them. So I've pulled them off the side. I'm going to make sure that they're looking like they're looking at my building, about like that. Make them a little skinnier, sure. And then once I feel like I have them set right, then it's just a matter of committing to that, and now they're looking across at my overall building. It's always useful to put people into the building, but again, it's worth spending time to really think about these people. In this case, the shadows aren't quite right, so they don't really feel like they fit. So in reality, I should spend a little bit more time working on it, but you guys don't need to see me doing it. Okay? So there are other options I mentioned on here that you could download a bird brush and add some birds in the sky. Sometimes people like that look. Sometimes you can add trees. Again, it depends a lot on what your overall building looks like and feels like, etc. But really the key here is finding a way to integrate it into the existing scene so that it feels like it belongs, and then this exists as its own entity. Okay? So I'm going to turn you guys loose to work on this today. This will be your last official exercise of the class. So you'll turn that one in, and it'll be done. Like I said, I'll hand out the grade sheets. I have put in all of the comments that you're going to need to do by the end of the semester, which is a total of, hold on a second here, 85 is what I'm expecting for you to have. So some of those, you have an assignment due. There would be 3 comments on that that's due. I went ahead and dropped those in so you can see how many total you need to have. 85 is the magic number. So you can see how you are against those 85. I don't think anything else needs explanation. So with that, we will end.